So, speaking from experience, I've tried a couple of these. What's up, family? Welcome to the Bacon Bits Podcast, where we desire for you to take the bits of information and immediately apply them to your life for success. The ground rules for our podcast is that it will always be encouraging, uplifting, and informative. The areas of life that we will be talking about on the Bacon Bits Podcast is dealing with having a balanced life. In order for you to get started and for me to get started, it's always these 5 words I love hearing you say out loud. Say these words out loud, please. Say valuable, information, applied, equals success. And today, me and my queen, some of y'all know her as my habanero sugar, my baby, Diana Bacon, will be co-hosting with me today on this wonderful subject we're going to be talking about. What's up, boo?
What's up, baby? Super excited to be here. Super excited with our guest. He is my bonus son. For those who don't know, you know. I'm going to be talking to my sweet Hernan Castro. We have him in the house today. So Hernan is a local mycology expert here in Tucson, Arizona. He leads foraging workshops on Mount Lemon and in other local sky islands during the monsoon season. He is a strong advocate of sustainability and respectfully harvesting wild mushrooms. He is passionate about educating on that specific subject. He is also the proprietor of The Desert Alchemist, which is a company that makes wild-crafted mushroom extracts. This company was founded because of his desire to find a natural way to support the health of his father. He started researching the medicinal properties of mushrooms and herbs, which led him to create an extract that would support his father's nervous system. Hernan, we are so grateful to have you today. Welcome to the Bacon Bits Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here and be able to speak in your podcast.
Amen. So this whole Desert Alchemist, you got started because of your dad having a problem. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So everything started back in 2013. Basically, I had learned how to grow basic mushrooms for gourmet purposes. Mushrooms that you can eat, mushrooms that you can cook, like oyster mushrooms. And I grew them for a couple of years, and then I stopped. And back in down the line, in 2015, my father suffered one huge stroke, and then a few months later, he suffered a second one, and then a third one. And it all happened within a relatively short amount of time. He lost mobility each time he had a stroke. So he eventually became half paralyzed on the right side of his body. And this caused him to go into a depression. He couldn't use his dominant hand anymore. He couldn't put on his clothes, couldn't sign papers, and he got depressed. And we went over to the hospital, and I spoke to the doctors there, and they showed me a scan of his brain. They showed me 3 sections of his brain that were pretty much gone due to blood loss. And the doctors told me that these parts would never recover. They were gone forever. He would never regenerate, and that the brain doesn't heal. And so they told me his life was gonna be severely impacted by this, and he would have to learn to cope with just using his left hand. So I asked the doctors. I said, "Well, isn't there anything you can do for to help the brain heal?" And basically their answer was no. There's nothing that can heal the brain. The brain can never regenerate. And I didn't like that answer. I always figured that there's always a solution to problems. Even if we don't know the answer, there's always a way to do something. So I went home and I started researching everything that had to do with nerve and brain regeneration, stem cell therapy, basically all these experiments that were being done. And one thing kept popping up every time that I looked, and it was these studies on mushrooms from Japan. It was a mushroom called lion's mane, and they were using this mushroom, and they're basically making an extract from it, and growing nerve cells. They were growing spinal tissue in like children. They were growing nerve tissue in rats and mice. They were treating mice with Alzheimer's. And so I kept finding more and more articles, and then I found an article that explained what the compounds are that are responsible for this healing. And then I ended up finding 20 of them, and I became fascinated with this topic, and I showed my dad. I made him read all these articles, and I showed him a couple videos, because my father, he used to be a doctor, so he was a general practitioner. So I figured he would need some convincing. So these are all peer-reviewed articles. You can find them on PubMed and NIH and other reputable universities and places that are industries that are conducting these experiments. But most of them come from Japan, China, and Korea. So my dad read them, and he became really excited. He said, I want to try this. Let's do it. And I said, well, this mushroom, I assume, comes from Japan. So I'm going to try to find a culture online. If I can't find the culture, then I'm going to have to import it. But I'll figure out how to get it to you. And he was like, okay, let's do it. So I went online, and I found a culture right away. And I ordered it, and it came in the mail. I prepared some grains that I sterilized. And I was kind of nervous because I'd never grown this kind of mushroom, because these mushrooms are different than what I was used to growing. So I got the syringe, and I injected the grains. I inoculated the grain bag with the mushroom. And then I said to myself, well, you know what? I'm going to wait till it colonizes, and then I'll figure out what to do next, because I've never grown something that, I thought I had never grown something that grows on a tree like that, but apparently I had. Anyways, I injected the bag. 2 weeks later, there's lion's mane popping off already in the bag. I didn't even have to do anything, and I was like, wow, that was way easier than I thought. So I grew a bunch of lion's mane, and then I dried them and powdered them, and then I figured out how to extract these compounds from the mushroom. The whole process took me about 6 months, but then I finally got a tincture that I gave my father, and I told him, you have to take this 3 times a day, 3, 4, maybe 6 times if you want, but at least 3 times a day. And, just remember to take it all the time. Don't stop taking it. If it doesn't help you, it's not going to hurt you. So just keep taking it. And these experiments, they don't happen. The results don't happen overnight. Some of these experiments that we read about, took months, at least 6 months. So just stick with it. And he did. He religiously took the extract. I think he took it more than I had told him, but he took it. And long story short is within a year of taking it, he had already regained like 99% of his mobility. So the sensation on his lips came back, sensation on his toes returned, his mobility started with 3 fingers, and then it moved to 4, and then 5, and then his wrist, forearm, and he made an incredible recovery. Everybody in my family was super shocked, and including myself, and I started taking this lion's mane every day too. I was like, it's not going to hurt me to take it.
We need extra brain waves.
Yeah, so I took it, and it ended up helping me with, social anxiety and ADHD in the long run. But yeah, it was an incredible mushroom. Changed my whole life. And then something really cool happened that also pushed me towards the path that I'm in right now.
Mm-hmm. What's that?
That same summer, after all this happened, my grandmother calls me and she says, "Hey, I know you're really into mushrooms right now. Do you want to go to a mushroom scientific conference if I pay for it?" And I was like, heck yeah.
Yeah.
So she said, just figure out how to get yourself there and I'll buy you the tickets. I'll pay for your hotel. So I did. I packed up my stuff and drove up to the White Mountains. This was back in 2017, I think. Mm-hmm. There was a special event with the North American Mycological Association, which is basically a group of mushroom scientists from all over the country that get together and they do an event in a different part of the U.S. every year. It just happened to happen here in the White Mountains in Arizona. So I went there and I watched a few conferences. I met a lot of people and I got to go foraging and I learned the basics on mushroom identification, and that it was enough information for me to start doing it on my own. And I ended up finding out that all of these mushrooms that I was reading about online, like lion's mane, turkey tail reishi, they grow right here in Mount Lemmon. So when I went up there, I found them all, and I was like, wow, everything's right here in my backyard. So it was more motivation for me to do what I love. That's how it started.
Wow. So that's an amazing story. And as a brain injury survivor, that inspires me and it gives me hope, which is why when I discovered you and decided I am adopting you, it was a matter of you gave me hope. I read your story. I read your story online. You've been published in a few different articles and papers. You've also even opened for, what was that movie?
Oh, Fantastic Fungi.
Yeah, and I think that's on Netflix or...
It's still on Netflix, yeah.
Yeah, so
it's popular.
that came to Tucson or Phoenix.
Yeah, Tucson, yeah. The Loft was playing it for, they played it for 1 month. They thought it was going to flop. It was a huge success, so they had extended it for like 4, maybe 6 months, and I was there that whole time.
Yeah, and you got to do kind of like an opening, explain what you did there?
Yeah, I set up my whole booth with all my mushroom stuff and talked about mushrooms. I basically opened for the premiere every day. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. So, you gave me hope, and because of that story and because of I did my research, I went in and I started reading some of these things that I was learning because my doctor said there's no way. Once we remove the tumors, once there's a big hole in your brain, there's no way that you can recover within the first year. If it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. And I didn't like the answer. So therefore I started taking some of your tinctures, and I actually at this point take quite a few of them. And on the podcast where Shay and I spoke about disability, I did share that I was taking Pain Mame. And that's I'm one of the biggest advocates, and I tell everybody at whatever events you might be at, try the Pain Mame, because people are so, they're getting addicted to these narcotics. Doctors are so quick to prescribe things that are not good for us. And the Pain Mame, whatever mix that you do, and I know that you've changed the chemistry of it a little bit, and it's just a blessing. So there's quite a few things that I take, and I know that I'd like to hear about some of your medicinal properties and some of the things that are some of the benefits that we can get from some of these mushrooms. And we're talking about regular mushrooms, people. I know people get really, really freaked out, and they think I'm going to take something and I'm going to get high, or I'm going to start seeing, I'm going to start seeing colors, or actually you see colors. I'm going to start hearing colors and seeing sounds, and like, this is not, you're not going to get a trip. This is not magic mushrooms, right? So I'm going to let you, the expert, talk about the medicinal properties and what are some of the great things that you've discovered, and some of the, I can't imagine how many people, I know I've sent several people your way, and they're all 100% of the people I've sent your way are getting benefits.
Well, I can start by talking about how I hear that all the time, almost every day when I'm selling mushrooms. People automatically assume it's magic mushrooms, and they either get scared or they get excited, and I'm like, no, I'm not working with those. These are magical, but they're not that kind. They help support the good in your body, so like the immune system, the nervous system, so they support what's already there. They help it become stronger, and so they're good. They're really good for you, but I have to educate people on this almost every day.
Yeah, and you know what I do hear, and saying, well, why can't, like the lion's mane? I know that most people at this point, who, if anyone just goes into a study, you'll find the benefits of lion's mane. But why can't I just eat it? And why can't I just go and fry it up in a pan with some onions and eat it with some rice? Like, won't I get all the benefits that way?
Well, the thing is that as humans, we used to produce this enzyme called chitinase. And chitinase, we used to make this enzyme because I guess back in a long time ago, we used to eat a lot of insects. And so our bodies were able to digest the exoskeleton of the insects. Over time, with domestication and agriculture, I think we lost the enzyme because we stopped eating bugs, or some of us did at least.
Some of us. Intentionally, at least.
Yeah. And so we lost the enzyme, and this enzyme would be very useful with mushrooms because mushrooms, their cell walls are made out of chitin. And chitin is just the mushroom equivalent of fiber or cellulose. We also can't digest fiber. So when you eat a mushroom raw or cooked, depending on, how well those cells broke down, you're not going to absorb most of that tissue. And so that's something that I had to figure out on my own because I did try feeding my dad raw lion's mane. Mm-hmm. And then I did some research and I found out that, the chitin, the medicinal compounds are found inside of the cell wall, and you need to break these walls open in order to access all these really good metabolites. Mm-hmm. So I did have a book in my house that my grandfather gave me after he had passed away that talked about extraction and herbal. So, it was like a herbalist book. And it was really weird that he had this book because he was all about math and engineering. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the books he gave me when he passed away, or, after he passed. And so I looked in there and there was a recipe for extractions. And so I figured out how to break the cells open, and you basically want to break these cells open to get the medicinal compounds. Depending on if the compounds are water soluble or if they're oil or alcohol soluble, you have to do some research, and you'll need to do that so that you can get all these benefits. Because otherwise, eating the mushroom or eating powdered mushroom is basically sort of wasting the product, because you'll absorb whatever is broken down, but at least 80 to 90% of it won't be, and so it'll just go right through your system, and you'll be paying a lot of money for something that you're not taking full advantage of. And a lot of companies do that. They sell you these products that are just ground up mushrooms, and either because they don't know or they do know, and they're still doing it.
So part of the way that you prepare your tinctures and some other products that we can talk about as well, what is the difference with the way that you produce these tinctures of the mycelium versus the fruiting bodies? And you're talking about just eating it, what's the difference on that?
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of companies out there that make products with mycelium, and they claim that the mycelium has more benefits or just as much benefits as fruiting bodies. But if you do some digging, you'll find that there's really no evidence to support that. There's only one method of producing a mycelium that can come close to a fruiting body, but not quite as good. And it's a very specific way of fermenting the mycelium in a liquid culture. And I know a lot of these companies are not doing that, because I can just see that they're using myceliated grains, or usually brown rice or oats. So, for those of you who don't know what that means, is basically you inject the liquid tissue of the mushroom into a grain, and the tissue starts eating the grains, and it colonizes it. It basically kind of looks like a mold got on it. The white mold is eating it, but it's just a mushroom. And so they take these grains afterwards, they grind it all up, and they serve it to you as a mushroom supplement or a mushroom product. But you're basically just eating the a grain product with a little bit of mycelium.
So is that, I've heard of coffee mushroom, and I've seen it advertised on Amazon. I see it advertised in a lot of places. And even I started taking it. I heard about lion's mushrooms right after my first brain surgery, and it was somebody brought me. It was a little packet, and it was just powder, and I was supposed to add it to my coffee, and it had like a powder taste. So it wasn't like the best thing, but I knew it was good for me, or at least I understood about it. So is that what you're talking about? Like they powder it up and then they add it to something?
Yeah, so they grind it up into a fine powder, and they just add spices to it, and then they give it to you, and they say, this is mushroom coffee. But it's basically mushroom tea, because there's no coffee in there. There's no caffeine or anything. It's just a ground up mushroom with herbs. And the myceliated brown rice stuff, it because it has the mycelium, it does have some compounds, but they're almost negligible. And just because they have mycelium in the grains, they can legally say it's lion's mane or reishi. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say it's negligible, but it's low. It's a significantly lower amount than you would get from a straight mushroom fruiting body, which is basically the raw mushroom, the mushrooms that you see at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. That's the fruiting body. And these fruiting bodies produce more metabolites than the mycelium, unless you're growing it under those conditions that I explained earlier. And wild fruiting bodies are even better because they're not grown in a sterile environment like lab-grown mushrooms. They grow outside, where they're they're dealing with weather conditions, they're dealing with viruses, they're dealing with bacteria, other funguses that are trying to fight them, and all these pathogens. So all this pressure from these organisms causes them to make these metabolites to protect themselves. And interestingly enough, because we share more than 50% of our DNA with fungi, we're more closely related to mushrooms than we are to plants. Everything that, or most of those organisms that affect fungi, all those diseases, those pathogens also are the same ones that affect us. So that's why we benefit from taking these extracts.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. So I know, based on what my experience was with that mushroom coffee, wasn't great, right? It wasn't great because I would make a cup of coffee and I would add it to it, or because you're right, it didn't taste like coffee. It was just muddy dirt water. It tasted like dirt water to me. So you started creating mushroom coffee this year, and you have a couple of different ones. So tell me about those and how are those different? Because I've tasted them, and I could tell you, as a barista, I manage 2 different coffee shops, and they are delicious. They are delicious. It's like quality coffee. So tell me a little bit about that.
So my coffees are actually made with real coffee that we get from Mexico and Oaxaca. It's a coffee that's grown up in the mountains and in the forest, and it's grown by indigenous communities. And I basically take that coffee and I infuse it with the medicine from the mushroom. So it's the real coffee. You get the full flavor and caffeine from the coffee, but you still get the benefits from the mushroom. So it's a win-win on both sides.
Yeah, and you also have decaf in case they don't want the caffeine.
Yes.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So you have 3 different varieties of this specific coffee. So tell me about what's the difference about those 3?
I have chaga coffee. That was my first coffee that I ever created.
And tell me about chaga.
So chaga is known as the king of medicinal mushrooms. It's a mushroom or fungus sclerotia. It's not really a mushroom. The real mushroom is kind of rare to see, but the sclerotia is basically this tissue that the mushroom creates, or the mycelium creates, while it's living inside the tree. And then it grows out of the wounds in a tree, and it kind of looks like a burl or like a burnt piece of charcoal. Mm-hmm. And it is super rich in melanin, and it has a lot of antioxidants, 1,000 times more than acai and blueberries and stuff like that. So I think it's one of the top organisms on the planet with the highest antioxidant count. And like I said, it's full of melanin, and that's why it's so dark colored, and it's super good for you. It turns the ibotenic acid, betulinic acid found in the birch tree, and converts it into all these compounds. And gives it a lot of antiviral properties. So it's known as the king of medicinal mushrooms and is used a lot in Siberia and Eastern Europe to make these teas. But that was my first choice because it was one of the most fascinating mushrooms out there.
Right on. So speaking from experience, I've tried a couple of these tinctures. And ladies and gentlemen, if you know me, you know good and well, I am like really skeptical of a lot of things when it comes to this wonderful temple that I live in. So I've taken the Happy Heart, which is for cardiovascular support. I've taken the Sweet Balance because my sugar levels are a little bit high. So I wanted to take some of that. And then recently when we went over and had a trip over to Greece, we started taking turkey tail. And let me tell you from experience, all three of these products are phenomenal. And this is always my favorite part with anything that I take. What were the side effects of these three things that I took? Nothing. That's why I take these products. And that's the coolest part. You get so many benefits from it, but there's also slim to no side effects from these things that he is introducing. So that was my biggest takeaway from these wonderful products that he's introducing. And I'm so grateful for his expertise in these areas.
Yes, babe. I know you only put the best of the best in that temple, and that temple is pretty delicious. I mean, it's pretty strong. So yes, I think it's important. I know we shifted from coffee straight to some of the tinctures, and you've heard me rant and rave to everybody about the pain mame, and I do take the turkey tail. So I've also taken Brain Boost and the Three Lions. So I know we're shifting from coffee. Tell me a little bit about those three, because that's really where the whole thing got started, right? With the whole brain neurology part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So after I discovered lion's mane, I started. Of course, I had read about turkey tail. I started reading about that mushroom, and then I heard about reishi, and then I was like, oh, what does that one do? And kind of snowballed from there. I started studying them all. And I started out making just those tinctures from just those 4 mushrooms and chaga. And then I started buying books and reading about all these other mushrooms that were also getting tested. And plants. Plants became an important factor in all this because they're also medicinal, or they also help support the body. They have medicinal compounds in them. And I thought maybe, they would work together better if I combined them all. Mm-hmm. So I started with the Brain Boost. I started researching herbs that I personally liked for the brain, like ginkgo biloba, bacopa, gotu kola. The Chinese club moss was a really cool one because it contains a compound called huperzine, which a few years back was a promising potential treatment for Alzheimer's. At least it was being marketed that way. Really interesting compound that helps cognitive function. Rosemary, and of course lion's mane, and some other mushrooms that I combined to support brain function. So Brain Boost was like one of the first things I created. And then the Three Lions is something that I invented last year because nobody has done this for some reason. I just figured mixing 3 different species of Hericium, which is the lion's mane genus, I thought mixing them together would be better. So I combined lion's mane, coral tooth, and bear's head, and so we named it Three Lions, and it's a really good support for the brain as well.
Man, so tell me, Hernan, what are your top 3 sellers?
My top 3 sellers are the Sleep Spell, and lion's mane, of course, is like number 1. Mm-hmm. Coffee sells better than the tinctures, but out of the tinctures, it's lion's mane, Sleep Spell, pain mame. Yeah, Mindy's, the anxiety one, is also a good one.
So you said it's anxiety. I know that right now a lot of people are dealing with anxiety. It's high.
Yeah, it's like a new trend. I remember like back in 2014, I thought anxiety was like made up. Mm-hmm. But I see I'm suffering from it. Everybody's suffering from it now. So that's one of the things that I'm always working on, is making some products that can support the support a calm and tranquility type of mood to help people deal with all this external stress. So
That's
yeah, that
excellent.
one's made with herbs, hops, skullcap, valerian, lavender, chamomile, passion flower. So everything's natural, and it's really good. I choose ingredients that are not gonna interact with medication because I don't want to have people deal with any problems.
Yeah, thank you for that. So if you, I thoroughly can listen and talk with you for hours because I'm fascinated. I always want to find the natural, healthy way. If God created it on the planet, it can help us heal. We just have to discover what those things are, and what better to find people that can do that for you because I'm not going to understand how to do all this. And I thank God that he gave you the knowledge and the desire. And I'm so pleased, and I'm so grateful that your dad got so much better. And that's an encouragement to you to look back. So where can I find you, Hernan? What are some of the things you do? I hear you go up to the mountains and look for mushrooms sometimes. Can I go with you? Like, what does that look like? Can people come?
Yeah, so you can. So I guide these tours on Mount Lemmon and other sky islands here in southern Arizona. I started doing that because I would go to the markets and I would sell my extracts, and people would ask me about the mushrooms, where I got them, and they would want to look at pictures. And so they started asking me after a couple of years. They were like, "Can you take me up there? Just take me by myself." But everybody wanted to do this, so I was like, "Oh my God, I can't do one-on-one." So eventually I decided to share that experience because I was doing it by myself, and it's really beautiful. And for some reason it never occurred to me that I could bring a bunch of people to experience what I live through up in the mountains. So I started doing these tours, and they take place every summer. I might do one this April because we've had so much water, but in the summertime we get all this rain, all the monsoons bring all the mushrooms out. So when we get these heavy rains, the mushrooms start growing everywhere in the mountains. So I guide tours in Madera Canyon, Mount Lemmon, Mount Graham. I do stuff in Xolo. This summer I'm going to go to New Mexico as well.
Okay, so where can I sign up for this?
Yeah, so we have a meetup group online, and you can get to it through my website. If you go to desertalchemist.com and go search for a tab that says foraging, you can go on there. It'll take you to my meetup link. You can create an account and RSVP to come out on one of the tours, and you get to see hundreds of mushrooms. We have the largest biodiversity of mushrooms in the country right here on Mount Lemmon.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So you are on all the social networks as well, right? And you do videos, and you do some, even some teaching on there.
Yeah, so I started making the videos too because people wanted to learn like what I know.
Yeah.
And I figured the best way to do it is to just, if they can't make it up there, and a lot of people that, they can't do that. They can't go on a hike. So I started making videos in the mountain where the mushroom is growing, and I detailed, the description and what it, if the mushroom has a taste or a medicinal property, where it grows. And it's very informative, and I started doing this a couple years ago because I figured if I can't bring people up there, I might as well share it.
Bring it to them.
Yeah,
absolutely. So you're on all the social networks, right? You're on Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram. You can find me at desert_alchemist. TikTok is just Desert Alchemist. Twitter is Desert Alchemist with a K instead of a CH. Facebook.com/Desert Alchemist, and YouTube, you just type in Desert Alchemist. You can find some of the videos there.
Yeah, I can tell you from experience, it's very easy to find you. And here locally in Tucson, Arizona, if for those who are lucky enough to be able to live in this beautiful town that we have, where can we find you? Are you in stores, or do I have to go somewhere specific? Tell me where you are.
So we're always at the farmers markets, the heirloom farmers markets in particular. We do all of them. The ones we do one starting Fridays at Udall Park on the east side.
Okay.
One at Steam Pump Ranch in Oro Valley on Saturdays. We're also doing the Rincon one temporarily on the east side in Vale. That's also on Saturdays. And Sundays at Rito Farmers Market. And all of these markets start from 9 to 1. In the summertime, it'll change from 8 to 12. We're also doing the Santa Cruz Farmers Market on Thursdays from 3 to 7. And I might start doing the Sierra Vista or Phoenix markets pretty soon.
That's awesome.
But yeah, if you can't find me there, you can go to the Food Conspiracy Co-op on 4th Avenue, and they carry all my teas and my coffee extracts. So you can grab something there if you can't find us.
That's excellent. And we haven't even talked about teas. There's so much, Hernan, that we can talk to you about. And I am just so grateful that you made it out here and we had some time. Thank you for being on the podcast. I am so grateful for you and for all the ways that you have helped me in my healing journey. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I love you and I appreciate you, Hernan.
Thank you. I love you too. I have to remind myself that the reason I started all of this is to help people. And that is something that I'm always going to be working on, trying to improve my products so that I can help everybody and help them step away from harmful pharmaceuticals as well.
Yes. Thank you, Hernan, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
All right. What's up, family? It's your boy, John Bacon from the Bacon Bits Podcast. Thank you so much for your support, likes, and ratings. Please don't just listen, but rate me, follow me, and subscribe. This is an amazing way to offer free support. My beautiful queen and I have some books that we have written for your growth.
So the first book we have is a workbook, actually. It's called Healthy Relationships, and this is a workbook through the lens of faith. Because what makes a relationship healthy or unhealthy? So this workbook is designed, it's a 12-week, it's a biblically grounded course, and every week has a few different principles. So some of our principles, some of our topics that we're covering are respect, cultivating security. And this is not just between a husband and wife. This is between parents, between siblings, between friends, between your bosses, employers. So it's really important, and everyone deserves a healthy relationship.
And also we have The Balanced Life by John Bacon. It covers how to be prosperous in your finances, relationships, your health, your mind, and your spirit. So you can pick that up on Amazon, also on audiobook. And we also have
The Unraveling, a creative healing journal, pinings, poems, prayers, and ponderings of my precarious life. I've had a testimony of, I've had 2 brain tumors and 2 brain surgeries, and I'm super grateful, but I'm still grieving the process of healing. And this is part of the process. In this book, you have devotionals, you have prayers, and you have some ponderings. And in between these pages, there's a space for you to also be prompted to paint and to create your own, or maybe you want to write something in these books. This is part of your creative healing journal that we get to walk through together.
And you guys can just head over to Kingdom Servants First. Kingdom Servants, the number 1, st.com. And you can purchase all 3 of these books. Thank you for your support, your love, and your contributions. God bless.